Part 3. Writings, Prose and Poems, Original and Translated. Historical Evolution of India. Om Tat Sat. Om Namo Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya. Nasatah Sat Jayate. Existence cannot be produced by non existence. Non existence can never be the cause of what exists. Something cannot come out of nothing. That the law of causation is omnipotent and knows no time or place when it did not exist is a doctrine as old as the Aryan race, sung by its ancient poet seers, formulated by its philosophers, and made the cornerstone upon which the Hindu man even of today builds his whole scheme of life. There was an inquisitiveness in the race to start with, which very soon developed into bold analysis, and though in the first attempt, the work turned out might be like the attempts with shaky hands of the future master sculptor, it very soon gave way to strict science, bold attempts, and startling results. Its boldness made these men search every brick of their sacrificial altars, scan, cement, and pulverize every word of their scriptures, arrange, rearrange, doubt, deny, or explain the ceremonies. It turned their gods inside out and assigned only a secondary place to their omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent creator of the universe, their ancestral father in heaven, or threw him altogether overboard as useless and started a world religion without him, with even now the largest following of any religion. It evolved the science of geometry from the arrangements of bricks to build various altars, and startled the world with astronomical knowledge that arose from the attempts accurately to time their worship and oblations. It made their contribution to the science of mathematics the largest of any race, ancient or modern, and to their knowledge of chemistry, of metallic compounds in medicine, their scale of musical notes, their invention of the bow instruments, all of great service in the building of modern European civilization. It led them to invent the science of building up the child mind through shining fables, of which every child in every civilized country learns in a nursery or a school and carries an impress through life. Behind and before this analytical keenness, covering it as in a velvet sheath, was the other great mental peculiarity of the race, poetic insight. Its religion, its philosophy, its history, its ethics, its politics were all inlaid in a flower bed of poetic imagery, the miracle of language which was called Sanskrit or perfected, lending itself to expressing and manipulating them better than any other tongue. The aid of melodious numbers was invoked even to express the hard facts of mathematics. This analytical power and the boldness of poetical visions, which urged it onward, are the two great internal causes in the makeup of the Hindu race. They together formed, as it were, the keynote to national character. This combination is what is always making the race press onwards beyond the senses. The secret of those speculations which are like the steel blades the artisans use to manufacture, cutting through bars of iron, yet pliable enough to be easily bent into a circle. They wrought poetry in silver and gold, the symphony of jewels, the maze of marble wonders, the music of colors, the fine fabrics which belong more to the fairyland of dreams than to the real, have back of them thousands of years of working of this national trait. Arts and sciences, even the realities of domestic life, are covered with a mass of poetical conceptions, which are pressed forward till the sensuous touches the supersensuous, and the real gets the rose hue of the unreal. The earliest glimpse we have of this race show it already in the possession of this characteristic, as an instrument of some use in its hands. Many forms of religion and society must have been left behind in the onward march, before we find the race as depicted in the scriptures, the Vedas. An organized pantheon, elaborate ceremonials, divisions of society into hereditary classes necessitated by a variety of occupations, a great many necessaries and a good many luxuries of life are already there. Most modern scholars are agreed that surroundings as to climate and conditions, purely Indian, were not yet working on the race. Onwards through several centuries, we come to a multitude surrounded by the snows of Himalayas on the north and the heat of the south, vast plains, interminable forests, through which mighty rivers roll their tides. We catch a glimpse of different races, Dravidians, Tatars, and aboriginals, pouring in their quota of blood, of speech, of manners and religions. And at last a great nation emerges to our view, still keeping the type of the Aryan, stronger, broader, and more organized by the assimilation. We find the central assimilative core giving its type and character to the whole mass, clinging on with great pride to its name of Aryan, and though willing to give other races the benefits of its civilization, it was by no means willing to admit them within the Aryan pale. The Indian climate again have a higher direction to the genius of the race. In a land where nature was propitious and yielded easy victories, the national mind started to grapple with and conquer the higher problems of life in the field of thought. Naturally, the thinker, the priest, became the highest class in the Indian society, and not the man of the sword. The priests again, even at the dawn of history, put most of their energy in elaborating rituals, and when the nation began to find the load of ceremonies and lifeless rituals too heavy, came the first philosophical speculations, and the royal race was the first to break through the maze of killing rituals. On the one hand, the majority of the priests, impelled by economical considerations, were bound to defend that form of religion which made their existence a necessity of society and assigned them the highest place in the scale of caste. On the other hand, the king caste, whose strong right hand guarded and guided the nation and who now found itself as leading in the higher thoughts also, were loath to give up the first place to men who only knew how to conduct a ceremonial. There were then others, recruited from both the priests and king castes, who ridiculed equally the ritualists and philosophers, declared spiritualism as fraud and priestcraft, and upheld the attainment of material comforts as the highest goal of life. The people, tired of ceremonials and wondering at the philosophers, joined in masses the materialists. This was the beginning of that caste question and that triangular fight in India between ceremonials, philosophy, and materialism, which has come down unsolved to our own days. The first solution of the difficulty attempted was by applying the eclecticism which from the earliest days had taught the people to see in differences the same truth in various garbs. The great leader of this school, Krishna, himself of royal race, and his sermon, the Gita, have after various vicissitudes brought about the upheavals of the Jains, the Buddhists, and other sects, fairly established themselves as prophet of India and the truest philosophy of life. Though the tension was toned down for the time, it did not satisfy the social wants which were among the causes, the claim of the king race to stand first in the scale of caste and the popular intolerance of priestly privilege. Krishna had opened the gates of spiritual knowledge and attainment to all, irrespective of sex or caste, but he left undisturbed the same problem on the social side. This again has come down to our own days, in spite of the gigantic struggle of the Buddhists, Vaishnavas, etc., to attain social equality for all. Modern India admits spiritual equality of all souls, but strictly keeps the social difference. Thus we find the struggle renewed all along the line in the 7th century before the Christian era and finally in the 6th, overwhelming the ancient order of things under Shakyamuni, the Buddha. In their reaction against the privileged priesthood, Buddhists swept off almost every bit of the old ritual of the Vedas, subordinated the gods of the Vedas to the position of servants to their own human saints, and declared the creator and supreme ruler as an invention of priestcraft and superstition. But the aim of Buddhism was reform of the Vedic religion by standing against ceremonials requiring offerings of animals, against hereditary caste and exclusive priesthood, and against belief in permanent souls. It never attempted to destroy that religion or overturn the social order. It introduced a vigorous method by organizing a class of sannyasins into a strong monastic brotherhood, and the Brahmavadinis into a body of nuns, by introducing images of saints in the place of altar fires. It is probable that the reformers had for centuries the majority of the Indian people with them. The older forces were never entirely pacified, but they underwent a good deal of modification during the centuries of Buddhistic supremacy. In ancient India, the centers of national life were always the intellectual and spiritual and not political. Of old, as now, political and social power has been always subordinated to spiritual and intellectual. The outburst of national life was round colleges of sages and spiritual teachers. We thus find the Samitis of the Panchalas, of the Kashyas of Varanasi, the Maithilas standing out as great centers of spiritual culture and philosophy, even in the Upanishads. Again, these centers in turn became the focus of political ambition of the various divisions of the Aryans. The great epic Mahabharata tells us of the war of the Kurus and Panchalas for supremacy over the nation, in which they destroyed each other. The spiritual supremacy veered round and centered in the east among the Magadhas and Maithilas, and after the Kuru Panchala war, a sort of supremacy was obtained by the kings of Magadha. The Buddhist Reformation and its chief field of activity were also in the same eastern region, and when the Maurya kings, forced possibly by the bar sinister on their escutcheon, patronized and led the new movement, the new priest power joined hands with the political power of the empire of Pataliputra. The popularity of Buddhism and its fresh vigor made the Maurya kings the greatest emperors that India ever had. The power of the Maurya sovereigns made Buddhism that worldwide religion that we see even today. The exclusiveness of the old form of Vedic religions debarred it from taking ready help from outside. At the same time, it kept it pure and free from many debasing elements which Buddhism, in its propagandist zeal, was forced to assimilate. This extreme adaptability in the long run made Indian Buddhism lose almost all its individuality, and extreme desire to be of the people made it unfit to cope with the intellectual forces of the mother religion in a few countries. The Vedic party, in the meanwhile, got rid of a good deal of its most objectionable features, as animal sacrifice, and took lessons from the rival daughter in the judicious use of images, temple processions, and other impressive performances, and stood ready to take within her fold the whole empire of Indian Buddhism, already tottering to its fall. And the crash came with the Scythian invasions and the total destruction of the empire of Pataliputra. The invaders, already incensed at the invasion of their Central Asiatic home by the preachers of Buddhism, found in the sun worship of the Brahmins a great sympathy with their own solar religion, and when the Brahminist party were ready to adapt and spiritualize many of the customs of the newcomers, the invaders threw themselves heart and soul into the Brahminic cause. Then there is a veil of darkness and shifting shadows. There are tumults of war, rumors of massacres, and the next scene rises upon a new phase of things. The empire of Magadha was gone. Most of northern India was under the rule of petty chiefs, always at war with one another. Buddhism was almost extinct except in some eastern and Himalayan provinces and in the extreme south, and the nation, after centuries of struggle against the power of a hereditary priesthood, awoke to find itself in the clutches of a double priesthood of hereditary Brahmins and exclusive monks of the new regime, with all the powers of the Buddhistic organization and without their sympathy for the people. A renascent India, bought by the valor and blood of the heroic Rajputs, defined by the merciless intellect of a Brahmin from the same historical thought center of Mithila, led by a new philosophical impulse organized by Shankara and his bands of sannyasins, and beautified by the arts and literature of the courts of Malava, arose on the ruins of the old. The task before it was profound, problems vaster than any their ancestors had ever faced. A comparatively small and compact race of the same blood and speech and the same social and religious aspiration, trying to save its unity by unscalable walls around itself, grew huge by multiplication and addition during the Buddhistic supremacy, and it was divided by race, color, speech, spiritual instinct, and social ambitions into hopelessly jarring factions. And this had to be unified and welded into one gigantic nation. This task Buddhism had also come to solve, and had taken it up when the proportions were not so vast. So long it was a question of Aryanizing the other types that were pressing for admission, and thus, out of different elements, making a huge Aryan body. In spite of concessions and compromises, Buddhism was eminently successful and remained the national religion of India. But the time came when the allurements of sensual forms of worship, indiscriminately taken in, along with various low races, were too dangerous for the Central Aryan core, and a longer contact would certainly have destroyed the civilization of Aryans. Then came a natural reaction for self-preservation, and Buddhism and separate sects ceased to live in most parts of its land of birth. The reaction movement, led in close succession by Kumarila in the north and Shankara and Ramanuja in the south, has become the last embodiment of that vast accumulation of sects and doctrines and rituals called Hinduism. For the last 1,000 years or more, its great task has been assimilation, with now and then an outburst of reformation. This reaction first wanted to revive the rituals of the Vedas, failing which it made the Upanishads or the philosophic portions of the Vedas its basis. It brought Vyasa's system of Mimamsa philosophy and Krishna's sermon, the Gita, to the forefront, and all succeeding movements have followed the same. The movement of Shankara forced its way through its high intellectuality, but it could be of little service to the masses because of its adherence to strict caste laws, very small scope for ordinary emotion, and making Sanskrit the only vehicle of communication. Ramanuja, on the other hand, with a most practical philosophy, a great appeal to the emotions, an entire denial of birthrights before spiritual attainments, and appeals through the popular tongue completely succeeded in bringing the masses back to the Vedic religion. The northern reaction of ritualism was followed by the fitful glory of the Malava Empire. With the destruction of that in a short time, northern India went to sleep, as it were, for a long period, to be rudely awakened by the thundering onrush of Mohammedan cavalry across the passes of Afghanistan. In the south, however, the spiritual upheaval of Shankara and Ramanuja was followed by the usual Indian sequence of united races and powerful empires. It was the home of refuge of Indian religion and civilization, when northern India from sea to sea lay bound at the feet of the Central Asiatic conquerors. The Mohammedan tried for centuries to subjugate the south, but can scarcely be said to have got even a strong foothold. And when the strong and united empire of the Mughals was very near completing its conquest, the hills and plateaus of the south poured in their bands of fighting peasant horsemen, determined to die for the religion which Ramdas preached and Tuka sang. And in a short time, the gigantic empire of the Mughals was only a name. The movements in northern India during the Mohammedan period are characterized by their uniform attempt to hold the masses back from joining the religion of the conquerors, which brought in its train social and spiritual equality for all. The friars of the orders founded by Ramananda, Kabir, Dadu, Chaitanya, or Nanak were all agreed in preaching the equality of man, however differing from each other in philosophy. Their energy was for the most part spent in checking the rapid conquest of Islam among the masses, and they had very little left to give birth to new thoughts and aspirations. Though evidently successful in their purpose of keeping the masses within the fold of the old religion and tempering the fanaticism of the Mohammedans, they were mere apologists, struggling to obtain permission to live. One great prophet, however, arose in the north, Govind Singh, the last guru of the Sikhs, with creative genius, and the result of his spiritual work was followed by the well-known political organization of the Sikhs. We have seen throughout the history of India, a spiritual upheaval is almost always succeeded by a political unity extending over more or less area of the continent, which in its turn helps to strengthen the spiritual aspiration that brings it to being. But the spiritual aspiration that preceded the rise of the Maharatha or the Sikh Empire was entirely reactionary. We seek in vain to find in the court of Poona or Lahore even a ray of reflection of that intellectual glory which surrounded the courts of the Mughals, much less the brilliance of Malava or Vidyanagara. It was intellectually the darkest period of Indian history, and both these meteoric empires, representing the upheaval of mass fanaticism and hating culture with all their hearts, lost all their motive power as soon as they had succeeded in destroying the rule of the hated Mohammedans. Then there came again a period of confusion. Friends and foes, the Mughal Empire and its destroyers, and the till then peaceful foreign traders, French and English, all joined in a melee of fight. For more than half a century there was nothing but war and pillage and destruction, and when the smoke and dust cleared, England was stalking victorious over the rest. There has been half a century of peace and law and order under the sway of Britain. Time alone will prove if it is the order of progress or not. There have been a few religious movements amongst the Indian people during the British rule, following the same line that was taken up by northern Indian sects during the sway of the Empire of Delhi. They are the voices of the dead or the dying, the feeble tones of a terrorized people, pleading for permission to live. They are ever eager to adjust their spiritual or social surroundings according to the tastes of the conquerors, if they are only left the right to live, especially the sects under the English domination, in which social differences with the conquering race are more glaring than the spiritual. The Hindu sects of the century seem to have set one ideal of truth before them, the approval of their English masters. No wonder that these sects have mushroom lives to live. The vast body of the Indian people religiously hold aloof from them, and the only popular recognition they get is the jubilation of the people when they die. But possibly, for some time yet, it cannot be otherwise. Historical